In this episode, Britta Wunderlich, Program Manager at Google, human mom, dog mom, and lover of planet Earth, joins for a discussion on finding purpose, volunteering, and making an impact in our communities, how to merge our passions with our skill sets, and carve out time for ourselves while being a parent. Her experiences volunteering with the Marine Mammal Center, Google Anthropocene, and MARAlliance, conservation efforts for seals, sea lions, sharks, and more, the role of technology companies in sustainability and climate change, becoming evangelists for the organizations we support, how to be thoughtful citizens, get educated, and make positive changes in our food, waste, and voting choices, why what we eat does matter, how to not let perfection be the enemy of the good, how we can all start thinking globally and acting locally to make a difference, and more. Hello, and thanks so much for joining. I'm very excited that Britta Wunderlich, Program Manager at Google, who is also a human mom, dog mom, and lover of planet Earth, is here to discuss her experiences today. Britta, welcome. Thank you so much for joining. I'm excited to have this conversation and have been continually inspired by the many ways that you've supported animals, people, and the planet through your volunteer efforts. So to start, please tell us a bit about you, including your career journey and how you got into volunteering to support animal welfare, sustainability, and conservation.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much, Erin, for having me on today. I'm really happy to talk about this with everybody. I currently live in Seattle, but I grew up in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and found my way out here by way of Chicago and San Francisco. My concern for the well being of our planet really started when I was really young. Can't even really tell you where it came from or how it started, but there are stories that my family likes to tell from just the days when I was really little. Starting with in second grade, my mom likes to tell a story of how instead of using a regular lunch bag like all the other kids, I insisted on using an old sugar bag for my lunch bag for a year. I think we finally had to swap it out for another bag, so it was torn to bits. But I was very insistent. I didn't want to create any waste, so I needed to use this sugar bag for my lunch. My older brother, I would get on his case all the time for letting the water run too long. He was brushing his teeth or not turning off the light when he left a room. So there's kind of a breadcrumb trail from when I was little that kind of leads me to where I am today. I've also always been really practical and pragmatic when it came to just decision making in life. And growing up, I think I really felt like I need to be successful. And successful for me was you need a good, stable job at a good company. And so I ended up getting a degree in mathematics. I took a lot of courses in college, but I ended up studying mathematics and ultimately decided when I graduated, at least people won't think I'm an idiot if they see math on my resume. So that's a plus. So I started my career as an actuary, but by way of the support and encouragement of a wonderful person that you all know named Erin McCann, I found my way to Google. And that's where I've been for the last 14 years, where I'm currently a program manager. Not a lot to be said there in terms of wildlife conservation, sustainability, all of those sorts of things. But I think when I felt like I finally hit a place of safety in my job life, I allowed myself to consider what else can I do to actually tap into these issues that I care about. And so that's when I started looking around. I looked within the company for communities of like minded people. I even started pitching product ideas to try to make some of the things that Google was creating more in line with kind of sustainability goals. But then I also looked outside the company for volunteering opportunities. And I think volunteering both within and outside the company is really where I've been able to feel like I have some sort of impact without completely quitting my job and going back to school and that sort of thing.
Like, I'd love to hear a bit more about how you brought these pieces together. So, when you think about that exploration process, what were some of the guiding factors for you in terms of what you were looking for and what you wanted to build on, in addition to the work that you were doing within Google, and how you landed on volunteering with the Marine Mammal Center?
Yeah. I think for me, and probably for a lot of people, it just came down to what makes me feel alive. The signals in me, the things that draw out strong emotions, those are the things that kind of led me to trying to volunteer at all. So if I read about something that made me angry, that made me sad, that got me excited, that was my signal of maybe you should take a closer look at that. And for me, it often came up in the context of wildlife conservation. It came up in the context of waste. It came up in the context of climate change. But in particular, one day I was reading about oil spills. And obviously, that has a really terrible negative impact on wildlife and the ecosystems where those things occur. And I thought, what can I do when these things happen? And I found my way to the Marine Mammal Center, which was listed as an organization in my area that would get called upon to really help with a cleanup and help with the wildlife when these things happened. So, after going through some training with them, I ended up on their animal care team. The animal care team at the Marine Mammal Center is where you care for seals and sea lions and the occasional sea otter. And essentially, you're a janitor and a nurse for these animals. So you're cleaning their pens, you're prepping their food, you're feeding them with the right amount of kind of time and training. You're also medicating them. And it was awesome. It was awesome. I was there Monday nights from 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. Probably not everybody's favorite time to be doing things. And so I think that's where the passion really comes in. You have to care a lot to be willing to spend those kinds of hours at a place. And of course, that doesn't count driving there and showering off the dead fish smell that's on you when you get home and all that sort of thing. But for me, it was worth it. It was really worth it. It fulfilled me. I was doing something that I wanted to do. Like, I think being able to be in direct contact with wildlife is amazing. And I felt purposeful. You feel like you're doing something, you're having a direct, tangible impact on these animals every time you're there. And that feels good.
Absolutely. When we reflect on potential ways to volunteer or to give back with organizations, as you mentioned, so often it can be areas of focus or problems in the world that we feel compelled to try to help solve. And we may struggle to figure out how to practically and consistently find and protect the time. Can you talk a little bit about how you made that work, mentioning the 7 to 11 period, as well as the prep and the cleanup after? How did you find the time, and how did you build the structure or the systems to help build that into your weekly routine?
Yeah. I think this is something that I would pay to do, and I was just volunteering my time. So the fact that I got to do it at all was a huge motivating factor for me to go. I didn't care the time of day or day of the week. It is hard when you're a working professional, and I had to accept, you know what, Tuesdays I'm going to be tired. Maybe I need to drink a little more coffee or tea to get through the day. Mondays I'm going to come home from work after a long day and I've still got more to do. I got to go help out these animals. So you just have to recognize that's the way it is, and it could be a sacrifice. It could be. I think for me, I was able to manage it and didn't feel like it was a significant burden in terms of kind of my balance in life. I was also doing it at the time when I didn't have kids. I'm a mom now. There were other volunteers at the Marine Mammal Center that were moms, and I'm extremely impressed that they were there contributing their time. Now that I'm a mom, I'm even more impressed. But one thing I'll say is that even for those out there that have kids is I think once you have children, it can actually feel like you've lost a little bit of your identity because so much of you goes into this new life you've created and you lose that time and focus on yourself. So I think it becomes even more important to carve out time doing something that speaks to you. And so I'd like to think that if I was still in California, I would still be volunteering with the Marine Mammal Center. I live in Seattle now, but yeah, it was just something that felt good.
That's wonderful. And it's very clear hearing your response, how much meaning you found from that experience. Can you talk a little bit more about what it was like to volunteer with the animals, and particularly given your background in mathematics, how you got up to speed in terms of animal welfare and animal care?
Yeah. And I was intimidated when I first looked for volunteering opportunities. I thought, who's going to want me? I don't know anything about animals. I want to work with animals, but I'm not a zoologist. I'm not a vet. But really, someone once said to me, if you have two hands and a heart, you can help. And that's so true for so many of these organizations. They're not flush with cash and people and resources. They need the help. And yeah, I felt very lucky that this was something that I got to do. I felt very privileged. It was something that I got to do. And working with animals, for me, that's like the dream. I think it's so cool. And so to be able to do that every week was pretty amazing. And the Marine Mammal Center, they're focused on research, they're focused on rehab, and they're focused on release. They're trying to get these animals back out in the wild. And so you know when you're there, you know that when you're feeding an animal, you know that when you're helping clean, you know that when you're giving them medication, that you're a part of that process. And you can even go watch these release days, which is just the most heartwarming thing in the world to see an animal that wouldn't have made it without you get released back into the wild.
Sounds like an absolutely amazing experience, and how powerful to see not only the day-to-day impact that you're able to have through your volunteering efforts, but also to see this animal be able to re-enter its natural environment. Incredibly moving. When it comes to the benefits that you experienced, it sounds like you found tremendous meaning, and it also was something that you felt tremendously grateful to be a part of. Would love to hear how your volunteering and your passion for sustainability connects to the work that you have done and continue to do at Google, and in particular, your efforts supporting Google Anthropocene. You talk a little bit about this project and the connections that you see between your volunteering and this work.
Yeah, so I think one, getting to be volunteer at the Marine Mammal Center, you're having that direct, tangible impact. And so you feel like you're doing something. It can feel really hopeless sometimes when you look at the challenges of the world and you think, what can I do? So when you get to have that kind of direct, tangible impact, it feels really good. You have a sense of relief. But yeah, then you look at your day job and you're like, this is pretty different from what I do day to day. And I did look within Google to try to find like minded people who wanted to tackle some of these challenges that I also felt were there in the world. And when I moved up here to Seattle, I stumbled across this community called Anthropocene, which is all volunteer led. It's all grassroots, all Googlers, over 4,000 members today, who all care about climate change. They care about sustainability. They care about all these issues that are linked in, like wildlife conservation. I couldn't believe that I hadn't found this community before. And I just ended up reaching out on a whim. I had seen a program that they were running, and I actually thought I have some ideas on maybe how they can make that better. And so I wrote up a document. I sent it over to them. I said, here are my thoughts on how you could be doing this. And they were impressed enough that they said, we want you as an organizer. So all of a sudden, overnight, I became one of the organizers of these volunteer groups. And it's this really incredible community where you're creating space for these conversations. You're harnessing the talent and passion of Googlers to address these issues. And while the projects that a lot of folks take on aren't necessarily drivers of things like reducing CO2, they are enablers. It's a technology company. There's a lot of incredible things you can do with software, especially when you think of the power of something like Google Maps or Google Earth in the context of climate change and sustainability. There were teams using Google Earth in combination with data from various nonprofit groups to monitor protected marine areas to see if there were boats coming in to fish. And when you have that kind of data, you can do something about it. There were groups who were using machine learning and AI to make analyzing camera trap footage faster for researchers. So they didn't have to spend hours in front of video footage waiting for a leopard to show up or something. There was maps technology to look at heat maps to understand if you have a white roof or a black roof, what's your contribution to urban heat. There's a lot of really amazing stuff that you can do with technology. And I think it enables groups that are already out there in the world trying to do good things to do their job better, to give them the data or tools they need to create the regulation that's necessary or do their work faster.
Absolutely. Inspiring examples. And I've been incredibly impressed at following a wide range of spaces of where Google is contributing. Another that comes to mind are the efforts related to leveraging AI and other tools to help reduce wildlife trafficking in collaboration with other nonprofits as well. So it's certainly powerful to think about leveraging that data in support of wildlife conservation and more. And it sounds like you were able to tap into community at a helpful time in terms of transitioning to a new location. Can you talk more about any of the benefits that you saw coming out of that and how you connected with other team members and areas of focus within that community group?
Yeah. And once again, it felt like such an honor to be part of this group. It's an extremely global group of folks, the organizers and the entire community. There's folks in Europe, there's folks in Asia, there's folks all over the place. And I just felt so privileged to get to work with them outside of my day job, so to speak, to see other people who were as passionate or even more passionate than I was about these issues and doing something about them. I think what was also really awesome for me and gave me a sense of hope is that I was acting as a program manager within this group. I had felt up until this point, my day job's a program manager, but what use is that to the Marine Mammal Center? But to be able to apply program management skills in a way that was enabling all of this work made me feel really good. It gave me a sense of hope that, you know what, maybe I haven't completely wasted my time here in corporate America. Maybe I actually can merge these two things, what I have skills and expertise in and what I care about. And hopefully I can find that space for myself in the future.
Absolutely. I'm glad to hear it was affirming. I would certainly say there are lots of connection points between your studies, the work that you've done, and your volunteer efforts. It's wonderful to hear how you came to that realization with the Marine Mammal Center and your work at Google. Would also love to talk a little bit about your work with MARAlliance. You've made impactful contributions for animals, people, and nature in all of these spaces, including as a research assistant for MARAlliance. Can you talk a little bit about their public mission and what your work involved and how your efforts help to address key challenges?
Yeah, absolutely. MARAlliance is a nonprofit that works to research, track, and protect marine megafauna in the Mesoamerican reefs. So they operate largely in Central America and work out of a variety of countries there. I went on several expeditions, as they call them, that they offer, which is really it's part education, it's part volunteering. And I think for me, it was a source of inspiration and hope because you go on these trips and you actually get to see what the day-to-day work of folks doing this work on the ground looks like and what it takes. And it's it's awe-inspiring. It really is. So some of the things that I got to do as a volunteer were basically snorkel and what we called in-water transects, where you're swimming along and you're making note of the marine life that you see. If you see a turtle, you write it down. You say where you saw it. If you see a certain kind of fish, you're writing it down. If you see a shark, you're writing it down. We assisted with shark baiting and tagging, and they're trying to monitor these shark populations. And so you would help set traps with bait, and then hope a shark comes along, and inevitably they do. And then you get to tag them, and then the researchers can continue to track and monitor that animal. They also had us help set camera traps, again, for tracking the marine life and just seeing what populations were like. And you realize it's hard work. You're out on a boat all day, you're out in the sun. I can't tell you how sunburned parts of your body that you don't think about putting sunscreen on, my calves, the tops of my hands. It's brutal to do this work. But the director, Rachel Graham, is probably one of the most impressive human beings I've ever had the opportunity to meet in my life. And I was just so inspired by her incredible leadership, the partnership she's created with local fishermen, her intelligence as a scientist, her humanity. She's just an amazing person. It makes you really feel like people can make a difference. She was one woman in the beginning, and now she and her team are a force to be reckoned with. And it's awesome.
Sounds like incredibly inspiring work. In terms of the research part of it, can you say more in terms of what the other facets to your work looked like or how you were connecting what you were just describing and helping to advance the research parts of the mission?
Yeah. So, since so much of it was about population tracking, I think that really helped the team understand what's the impact of everything that's going on in this area, the industry, largely fishing industry, on the population we're seeing, and what's the impact of maybe positive regulations been enacted. Maybe they were able to establish a protected marine zone, and now you're seeing the turtles come back, or the sharks come back, or the stingrays come back. And so you're helping largely with the data collection that helps them to tell those stories or advocate for change.
And when we think about advocacy, we could think about many different lenses of that. When you think about the work that you did and how it helped to increase engagement and awareness of these key issues, can you say more in terms of education, reach, helping people not only get involved, but learn about some of these challenges for the first time?
Yeah, I think anyone who participates in these expeditions becomes an evangelist for them. They're just so incredible. You want to tell everybody all about them, and I did. I was so excited to tell family, friends, coworkers, and I became an internal evangelist for the expeditions at Google for a while. Whenever the expeditions were coming up, I would find community groups within Google that I thought might have an interest, and I would send them information on it. I held information sessions. I created documentation and FAQs for folks who were interested in participating and wanted more detail. I had the director of MARAlliance come in and actually give a presentation so folks learn more about what they were doing, and it's free marketing for them. But it felt really natural to me. I was just so in love with what they were doing and so inspired that I wanted to just keep helping.
Amazing. And it sounds like you were able to help bring other people in getting engaged with some of these topics. Can you say a bit more about some of the advocacy areas of focus of the organization, some of those key issues that were really priority then and or priority now in terms of advocating for change?
Yeah, the main marine megafauna that they're really focused on is sharks. And it's hard to find people who have a soft spot for sharks given how we portray them. But sharks are in real trouble. They're overfished. There's actually a lot of communities in the world that fish and eat shark fins. They're struggling. And I won't necessarily say that they are the keystone species of a marine habitat, but these ecosystems are delicate, and you remove one piece of the puzzle and the rest starts falling apart. And so by helping to understand how these populations are doing, using that data to advocate for protected zones, to try to decrease fishing, to engage local fishermen and the community on how to do things differently or maybe even change what they fish, all those things are happening because of the research they do.
Wonderful to hear. And you're raising an important point when it comes to sharks, in that we can have perceptions of various species and we may not be aware of the impact of our choices on an individual species or an ecosystem. But certainly, awareness of some of these issues can not only help us to get involved in the types of volunteer efforts that you're describing, but also help us to think about the context of our own food decisions, our own travel considerations, the behaviors and the practices that we follow while traveling in kind ways for animals. So, at least that's certainly what I'm hearing when you talk about sharks and shark fins and other aspects related to fishing in particular. Would love to hear some of your advice. So, for those interested and inspired by what you're describing and looking to explore getting involved with particular organizations or even just reflecting on the kinds of areas that they might find meaning and purpose in, what advice would you have in terms of navigating that process for a cause that they care about as a volunteer?
Yeah, so I think for folks that are hearing this and trying to figure out what they can do, first I have a few quotes for you. And one of them I mentioned earlier, which is if you have two hands and a heart, you can help. And that's so true. When it comes to volunteering, there's so many opportunities. Organizations need you, they want you, and there's a path for you to do that. Maybe I'll add money helps too. If you don't feel like you can contribute the time, these groups are desperate for funding. I'm trying to recall from I work with MARAlliance. One animal tracking tag for a turtle was something like $3,000, something like that. And so to do this work, it can't be done for free. And so there's also that. If you feel like I don't have the time, but I want to do something, I want to make a difference, guess what? Your money really does make a difference. The other things I would say are think global, act local. That motto really resonates for me because the issues that we face in the world can feel insurmountable and huge. And you can feel like, how can I do anything about that? But it's about all of us doing that little bit that we can do where we are that adds up to global change. And I really believe that. So every little bit counts. Don't ever let yourself believe that it doesn't, it does. I think there's really two things you can do. One, I mentioned volunteering. What makes you come alive? What brings out those emotions in you? That's what triggered me to seek things out. And the other is just be a thoughtful person and citizen. There's so many things that you can do to just educate yourself. Look at the food you eat. Look at the waste you create. Look at who you're voting for. Just read, just educate yourself. Speak up for the little guys, and the little guys could be the plants outside your window. And you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be vegan. You don't have to be zero waste in your home. Every little bit counts. Don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. Every little thing that every person on this planet does makes a difference.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think so often, myself included, we can become overwhelmed by the magnitude of the problems and feel like our efforts can't possibly solve those problems. But for me, to your point about food choices, the food that I choose to eat every day is at least three instances where I can make decisions and feel empowered and actually reduce some of that anxiety for animal welfare, and the planet and climate and all of these other things because that's one small thing I can do. And I know in that instance, I'm doing the best I can with the choices I have available at that moment. Can you talk a little bit about any specific examples, just for those that are inspired by what you're saying, but looking to connect that to practical decision making when you think about some of the small changes you just mentioned, either that you were inspired to make from the volunteer efforts and the work that you've done, or just illustrative examples of what you're describing?
Yeah, I think sometimes it's hard for a consumer to make big changes happening because so much of issues like climate change need to be driven by industry and business. But one thing that folks are probably aware of, and if you aren't already, is really what you eat does matter. You can look a lot at adopt meatless Mondays. We do that in our house. I look up, let me find a good tofu or lentil recipe for this Monday. You can look at the ingredients that are going into your food and just understand, oh, palm oil is coming from places that are destroying forests that orangutans need to survive. So you know what? I'm not going to buy stuff with palm oil in it. You can find those little things and incorporate them into your grocery shopping, into your meals. I do think food is one way that all of us can make a little bit of a difference.
Absolutely agree. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's inspiring to hear how you're bringing in those new options and trying new things and building that into your week. I think any change we can make in terms of building in plant-based foods is a win. I really appreciate you sharing that. For those that are interested in learning more about you and your work, where can they go?
Ooh, you can reach out to me. Find me on LinkedIn, find me on Instagram. Yeah, let's be friends.
We'll make sure that all of those links are included with this recording. And I know we've touched on a lot of topics. Is there anything that we haven't yet touched upon or any additional insights that you would like to share with our listeners?
Gosh, I think just talking about all of this has reinvigorated me. So I just want to say thank you to you, Erin, for having these conversations and helping to others to just think deeply about these topics and find ways to bring more of it into their own lives because I think it can be really powerful for everyone.
Well, thank you so much. The feeling is absolutely mutual. You are inspiring me to get moving in terms of additional volunteer and advocacy efforts and to think about that in sustainable ways. I think any opportunity to support, to your earlier point, is wonderful. And I'm appreciative that we have ways of donating through social media. We have ways of giving back to organizations we care about. And you're helping me to think deeply about ways to contribute and get involved and collaborate with nonprofits in new and impactful ways. So I really appreciate everything that you've shared. I'm so inspired by the work that you've done, the volunteering that you have really advanced in a variety of different ways with your many skill sets and how you have integrated all of these things in with work and life and parenting and volunteerism. So thank you so much for sharing your experiences. This has been an amazing conversation.
Thank you. This has been awesome for me too.
Thank you so much. And so we'll make sure that those links are available in these recordings so everyone can learn more and connect with Britta. Thank you. Thanks so much for joining this episode of the Compassionate and Beneficial Living podcast. Please follow, subscribe, share your comments, share with others, and let us know what topics you'd like to hear covered next.